Welcome to Unfixed. This podcast explores the intersection of artificial intelligence and the institution of higher education. I am Zach Justice, Professor of Communication Studies and Director of Faculty Development.
And I'm Nick Janos, Professor of Sociology.
We are employees of Chico State, and we will discuss some of our work, but this podcast is not affiliated with Chico State, and the views expressed here are not representative of the university. Dr. James Frazee is Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at San Diego State University. He is nationally recognized leader in AI and data-informed decision-making. He spearheaded the San Diego State University AI and Digital Transformation Survey that has since been adopted system-wide across the California State University system. Dr. Frazee is known for his collaborative, service-oriented leadership that advances student success and institutional innovation. He was named SDSU's Manager of the Year in 2020 and received the university's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2022. James, welcome to Unfixed.
Thank you. Appreciate your having me.
Well, we're thrilled to have a chance to talk with you about a variety of things, but we wanted to jump into something that seems like a strength for our San Diego State University from the outside, and that's the sort of academic IT partnership that you've been able to be a part of there. So we're wondering if you could just speak a little bit about how that partnership works, maybe give us a little bit behind the scenes about how it is that those two units have come to be collaborators in that space. Because as I'm sure you've seen across the national landscape, that is not the same everywhere.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, happy to tell our story. So first, in terms of the framing, I think this is really important. At San Diego State, strategically, it was more of a philosophical declaration really than a, framing this as a technical issue or security issue. We really see AI, generative AI specifically, as a academic capability. And that framing was really important because that means that the teaching and learning, the academic affairs folks, the student affairs folks really need to be driving this. And for IT, we need to be providing the enabling environment. So I think that framing of AI as a academic capability is a really key part of our strategy here. And then, we started with this listening infrastructure. You mentioned the survey. We rolled that survey out in 2023. We could go crazy talking about the data from the survey, which is absolutely fascinating because we started at San Diego State in 2023. So we've been able to measure the velocity of change over time. And that's been super helpful for scaffolding conversations with our community. But that measurement really cuts through the noise and allows us to ground the process in reality as we're thinking about where we're going. So that was really the start, and the foundation was this idea of measurement. And then based on what we heard from that survey, we discovered that we needed to do more enablement. And we did that through, and the framing we've used for this entire initiative is the academic applications of AI. So if you go to the website we have for this, it's aai.sdsu.edu. And that has a lot of this information that we'll talk about this afternoon. But one of the things was clear, and that was we needed some low barrier on-ramps for folks to learn about AI and to demystify AI. So based on what we heard from that first version of the survey in 2023, we created a micro-credential for our faculty. We started with our faculty. We've since scaled that up to our students, and now it's been made available system-wide across the California State University. And here at San Diego State, that's now a requirement for all of our first-year students who go through this thing called the first-year experience. Sometimes people refer to that as our freshman seminar. It's a one-unit general studies course to really make sure the students get started on the right foot. Well, now that AI micro-credential is baked into that first-year experience. So that's been really important here for us in terms of providing that kind of enablement. The next thing that we've done is provide a lot of guidance. And we've done that through working with faculty in the University Senate, with our associated student government leaders, with the library, with the Center for Teaching and Learning, with the campus stakeholders, to make sure that we're addressing what we're hearing in the survey. So, for instance, one of the things we heard from the students was, and this is a verbatim quote that's just kind of etched in my memory, just tell us what you expect and be clear about it. And that speaks to the variance across classes that students see. In one class, within a particular field of study, it might be encouraged. In another class, it might be forbidden. And so the students are getting mixed messages, and that's really confusing and really stressful, right? And so they have this fear of missing out, that they're not taking advantage of this tool. And then there's a fear of being, labeled as a cheater. And there is the relationship with the faculty member, which is now being compromised as a result of this. This couldn't possibly be your work. It's way too good, right? And so that stress is something that we've addressed with the University Senate passed last year unanimously a policy requiring a syllabus statement on AI. Didn't tell people what to put, just that they needed to make their disposition clear to their students. And that's been an important step forward. We also used a classification schema for when, not telling anybody that they have to use AI, but when you use AI, here are the different parameters. And that's been codified now in our curriculum guide. That also went through our university senate. So all of this survey data has been really useful for informing that guidance. We've also provided some do's and don'ts, and heuristics for our faculty and our staff in terms of, being aware of the privacy considerations and really encouraging people to use our enterprise tools rather than the free versions of these tools, and really making people aware through those micro credentials of, if you're not paying for the tool, then your intellectual property, your privacy might be at risk, because there is the potential for the vendor in this case to use that information to train the underlying large language model. So there's that guidance. And then maybe most importantly, I would say, is this trust posture we've taken. And we have a very clear statement on privacy, and I can get you links for all of this stuff that we have put out to the entire community. It's not focused on faculty, staff, or students. It's really for the entire community, that makes it clear that there's a technical safety net. If you use the enterprise versions of these tools, we're not tracking what you're doing. It's essentially like an NDA, right? A non-disclosure agreement. We're not tracking, monitoring your use of these tools. And so the thing that people, I think are starting to come to realize is the fact that that data is being isolated in a secure environment that we don't have eyes on makes them much more comfortable using these tools, right? It's an academic freedom issue, really, when you think about it. And so that privacy statement has been really essential for us to, stay within SDSU's kind of legal and ethical and privacy boundaries. So that's another key a part of our strategy. So I'd say measurement, enablement, guidance, and trust are kind of the things that have been the foundation of that academic IT partnership that has really served us well.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I really appreciate the intentionality, how you developed a philosophy, and what I would even say like a story behind the technology. And I've, witnessed this here in past technological deployments where there is no story, there is no philosophy, there is no data. And the reaction from faculty can be it can be really jarring when IT shows up at your meeting and says, okay, folks, everything you've been doing for the last 10 years, you're never doing that again. We're doing this now. And there's no story, there's no philosophy, no intentionality. And that really breaks the trust, or at least exposes that there's sometimes a lack of trust between these different divisions that have different needs, different mission statements, different priorities. So I really appreciate hearing that, how you're doing that there. And I'm assuming you
One
carry
thing
some of
real
that
quick.
stuff over to other technologies as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick story because you mentioned story, and this is kind of a fun one. So my son, who grew up here in San Diego, went to high school here in San Diego. He's off in Northern California, going to college right now, and he has a buddy who is going to school here at San Diego State. Well, his buddy at San Diego State sent him a yik yak message, which was this meme of me. It was like a cartoon character version of me, and it said literally, it said some guy named James Frazee, and it was me pulling a Trojan horse. And inside the Trojan horse was President De La Torre, the president of San Diego State. And the Trojan horse was adorned with OpenAI logos. And the tagline at the top of this Yik Yak message was, "They think we're stupid." And my son got this from his buddy, Tanner, who's one of our mechanical engineering students, with, like a ha ha emoji. Thankfully, my son shared it with me. And that was actually the impetus of that privacy statement. And
Mm,
we were looking at the data on the students who were paying for OpenAI because we could tell that because they used their SDSU
Right.
credentials to sign up for their paid accounts. Had they used their Gmail or something, their personal accounts, we wouldn't have known. But many of these people in the community used their SDSU credentials so we could see who was paying and who wasn't. And it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can give you the exact data. And they weren't using the .edu enterprise version. And a lot of these students, like you're paying for a couple of these tools, and I think I've heard you say this, Zach, in the past. That's like the cost of your monthly phone bill. That's not an
Right.
insignificant amount of money. So we really wanted to act on that information that we got from that fun story, to really let the student government know that we were serious. So if you go to our privacy statement on our website, there's actually a little 1 minute video featuring one of our student leaders talking about our commitment to trust and transparency. So just another quick, fun little story that was really
yeah.
influential.
No, that's a great story. It's I've actually started just now this week as I prep, I'm adding some of that in there, like that part of that story of like, why should you sign up for and use the EDU version of this? And here's why. Because I don't know if that really got out to students. And I think they're afraid to use it, perhaps, skeptical for sure.
Well, the free versions have rate limits,
Hmm.
which is a
Yeah.
big deal,
Yeah.
and they're more likely to hallucinate. They're not as accurate. The models aren't as robust, and that's going to change over time as they mature and they get better and better. But today, I think the rate limits that in and of itself is a pretty compelling reason to use the .edu version, especially knowing that their information is safe.
Yeah, totally.
The funny thing about that is, and we've had similar conversations with students on our campus, and they, to some degree, it illustrates a lack of trust with the institution, which I understand. Like this is a time of low trust with institutions, but Nick and I have had a lot of conversations lately about making fair comparisons and accurate trade-offs. And okay, you cannot trust the CSU, but that means that you are putting trust in Google or in OpenAI, that they're going to be more careful with your data than the CSU is. And maybe you make that bargain, maybe you don't, but a lot of people aren't thinking it through an accurate comparison. James, one thing that you said that I just want to make sure hits home for the listeners is the piece about partnering with academics so that then everyone sort of, I don't want to say gets on side, but everyone understands the place of this and what it is that we're doing, understands that they have to have a policy. One of the things that Nick and I have experienced on this campus and interacting with other campuses is faculty that treat this as an optional technology the same way other things are. And we've told people in person this isn't like a clicker where you can decide, do I want a clicker or do I not want a clicker, right? You have to rearrange what you're doing in terms of teaching and learning, in some ways, especially if you don't want students to utilize the technology. But this isn't something that we're just opting in or out of like it's a Canvas feature or something like that. This is omnipresent in other parts of our or in other parts of our lives. So
Yeah,
it's
these
one of the
tools.
reasons I think the IT academic affairs partnership is so critical with this is just the framing of this for faculty.
Yeah, as the tools become more and more ubiquitous, those conversations are essential. The other thing that I need to mention in terms of academic IT partnerships, something that's been absolutely essential here at San Diego State are our AI fellowships. So we have a long history of providing fellowships to faculty, which is providing them with reassigned time or course release to help us with different strategic initiatives. In this case, in 2023, we provided our first two AI fellowships to faculty. We also, for the first time ever, provided fellowships to students. We'd never before provided student fellowships. Well, we did in 2023, and they were AI focused. And that has been so important to hear those voices. And those fellows, both the faculty and student fellows, were absolutely essential in coming up with the survey instrument itself, analyzing the data, and then thinking about most importantly, how are we going to act on that data? So that was a series of conversation with those fellows. And now when we're meeting with faculty, when we're meeting with students, it's those fellows that are up there talking. It's not the IT person up there speaking. It's somebody who may be a little bit more relatable to those folks.
Yeah, interesting. So yeah, let's switch slight gears here. A lot of what we're talking about now is sort of predicated on the idea or the understanding ChatGPT EDU. So those of you who aren't not familiar, this is a product that OpenAI sells to universities, and California State University entered into an agreement with OpenAI last spring, so spring 2025, to provide EDU accounts to all faculty, staff, and students, about 500,000 licensed there. So that was monumental. Zach and I have written and talked a lot about that. We had some of the decision makers on this very podcast talking about the origins of that. But James, I want to ask you, have you noticed in the time since that announcement and the deployment of EDU, has that changed the AI conversation, the culture, some of the way people are adopting it or talking about it at San Diego?
Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, this was a seismic decision, right? And the thing that it has done is really vaporized the equity barrier, right? Now, students, faculty, staff, everybody has access to this more robust version of ChatGPT, which has leveled the playing field. And for that, I am actually very grateful. And so we went from, restriction in the, 2023 timeframe, really kind of panic and prohibition to now what is kind of wide open, dare I say, sanctioned access. So that's totally changed the conversation here, Nick. And when you look at the numbers, it's really clear that the students have already chosen their generative AI tool. And they're already paying for that chosen AI tool. And it's ChatGPT. One of the things that survey, it asks about tool usage, it asks about opinions, especially as it relates to the world outside of school and their careers and how this will relate to their work as a professional. But it also asks about their expectations for us as an institution. And so we need to be thinking about, what are people comfortable with? And if you looked at the tools that they're using, the number one tool, all 3 years of the survey, we've done it 3 times now, has been ChatGPT by a long shot. The next highest was Grammarly, which is, people don't think of that. Many people don't think about that, especially outside of the academy, as a generative AI tool. So they've already chosen, they're already paying for this tool. The question isn't whether to adopt it, it's whether we'll support the choice they've already made, right? And clearly, if you look at just the spend, out of pocket for San Diego State, of the people who responded to the survey, right? So I always have to make that really clear. Of the people who responded to the survey, about $300,000 are being spent by individuals who are paying for ChatGPT, at that $20 a month rate using their own funds. And there is both faculty and staff and students who are paying for these tools. So part of our role is to make sure that people see, what's the upside of using the EDU version, Right now that access is still really fragmented, and I would say some of us are leveraging the tools, others are not. So yeah, definitely changed the conversation. I think that if you look at the people who are paying for the tools outside of the EDU users, these are the people who are using 7 or more tools when we look at the survey data. So just backing up a little bit on that kind of listening infrastructure. This year, when we rolled out the survey to the entire California State University system, we were committed to doing a cluster analysis to look at by campus. Initially, we were thinking 2 categories, AI engaged and AI cautious. And what we found is that that was really not as useful, and to reflect reality a little bit more accurately, we have now got a 5 level cluster analysis. AI non-use, so that's somebody who's not using any AI tools. AI cautious, somebody who's using one tool. Often it's this one that we're talking about now, ChatGPT. We have a median level of use, which is 2 to 3 tools, an AI engaged, which we consider to be 4 to 6 tools. And then, as I mentioned, the power users, which are often the same ones who are paying for this stuff, are using 7 or more tools. So we're using that data. We're not saying we're not using use of tools as a proxy for literacy. That would be conflating things. We're not doing that. But we want to provide to our academic leaders, to our campus community, the data on just where we are today in terms of the utilization of these tools. And that's all just to say the clear winner is ChatGPT. It's just an overwhelming consensus across every segment, students, faculty, and staff. ChatGPT is the overwhelming first choice.
Awesome. Thank you, James. We probably have time for one more question, and in some of our episodes we end with a segment we call irresponsible speculation, and we're not going to force you to do that. I think you're a little bit too high profile for us to put you on the spot like that. But
Too
Nick and I have had
kind.
a lot of conversations lately about what's going to come next, and I'm starting to gear up with some of these vibe coding tools. I've started to create a couple of things, have conversations with some people on our campus about Claude Code, or I think what's the more user-friendly version that just launched in the last 48 hours, but also from Anthropic.
Yeah.
And so, from where your vantage point, not necessarily speculating about like, oh, what does ChatGPT or what does OpenAI have, in the hopper that they haven't made public yet, but what do you think is going to come next in terms of what we're going to need to adapt to and see next, both from the academic affairs side as well as from the IT side?
I'll just jump in because one way that we framed this or have talked about it before is sort of the agents that are already starting to hit the market, but an issue that we think is something that IT, faculty, students, staff, everyone should start really planning and thinking about that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Agents and the ability to create your own agents has never been easier, and it's going to get even easier looking ahead. I think that multimodal AI, students using these tools in a variety of really rich, dynamic ways that we haven't seen before, that's going to start to proliferate here in 2026. The one thing that I wanted to touch on, and it's something that I feel compelled to mention, and I hope it makes it onto the podcast, is about AI and well-being. And one of the things that the survey has revealed is kind of emerging, I might call them everyday harms. So I mentioned students' fear of falling behind peers who are using generative AI more skillfully. There's the fear of misconduct accusations when they worry that their legitimate work might be mistaken for being AI generated. There's this trust tension between students as well as students and faculty increasingly questioning one another's authenticity and intentions. Um, and uncertainty about expectations. I talked about that in terms of what's allowed, right? And so there's also this kind of identity threat where, students are kind of wondering, what's my real ability, especially in kind of writing intensive fields now. So it's such a concern of ours here. Because this is all operating within a psychological environment. It's not just a tool. That we are going to be providing an AI and anxiety workshop series to our community. And we're doing that in partnership with our counseling and psychological services group. And it's really going to be a guided space for students, especially to talk openly about how these tools are affecting their motivation and their confidence, and really kind of deconstruct the fears that they have and the performance pressure that they're facing and the self-efficacy concerns they have. And the emphasis is really on augmenting rather than replacing critical thinking. And the metaphor I love to use is just like you wouldn't send a robot to the gym for you. If you use AI, if you misuse AI or use AI irresponsibly, you're going to get a flabby brain, right? And these students care about how their fitness, right? And in terms of their intellectual fitness, these are conversations that we need to have with them, on why, from a psychological level as well as an academic level. So that, trying to, take a very human-centered approach to this is really important. And this is new territory for us. We've never done one of these workshops before. So I'm excited to see how it goes. And I just felt like that was something important to mention.
Yeah, no, that sounds really amazing. And I can't wait to see and hear about how that goes. What you're all doing down there in San Diego is 1 to 10 steps ahead of, I think, most campuses. It's really impressive. And I'm hoping that listeners can like sort of, whether you're faculty or you're in IT, learn from what San Diego is doing and incorporate that. A lot of things that you're telling me now, I'm already thinking about how I'm going to incorporate that into my story. I tell my students about why and when and why we're not using AI in certain instances and why we're using it in others. So I think there's a lot of valuable things there, even at the instructor level here.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a workshop that's starting. It's leveraging a lot of the stuff that Zach and Nick, you created at Chico with your AI retrofit faculty development. We've got a workshop that started actually yesterday was the launch of an AI ready course design workshop. Our goal was to have a faculty member from every one of our undergraduate majors. We ended up with about 80 people, which is really extraordinarily great. And part of the idea there is just to create space for them to think about redesign of activities in this age of AI. And one of the things that they're doing is they're creating a video reflecting on this experience, what they did, why they did it, the outcomes that they're seeing as a result. And that will be considered as a contribution to our AI in Action video series, because the biologists don't want to hear from historians. They want to hear from
Right.
biologists, right? And so theoretically, we will have examples, which faculty need right now, from all of these different disciplines. Some that may resonate, some that may not. But the idea is just, again, creating the space for these conversations and really getting faculty to talk with one another about how they're helping students see these tools as important for them in the world outside of school, but also to build this resilience and not a dependency on using these tools. And how do you do that with your learners? So it's a really exciting time. Big shout out to Chico. That AI retrofit curriculum has been really helpful here to scaffold the work we're doing. So it's a team sport, right?
Yeah, James, I've said so many times, and I think on the podcast too, that in this era, the challenge is so big. We all need collaborators, not competitors. And so Nick has developed a lot of stuff locally within social science and with his own program of sociology. Obviously, we've developed some curriculum and we've benefited from some of the stuff that San Diego has done and from some other campuses. And I've told a group of retrofit faculty that Nick and I were working with just last week, we're either going to make it through this together or not at all. And I think that's the mentality that all of us need to have with this. And so thank you for both having the humility to borrow whenever you need something and also providing the resources out to other people throughout the system and nationally. I think that's the spirit that a lot of us need, and I appreciate you leading by example.
Well, thank you, Zach and Nick, for this opportunity to share our work and just super grateful for everything you're doing.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. You can find our writing on meltsintoair.org and connect with us on Blue Sky at meltsintoair.bsky.social and on LinkedIn, Zach Justice and Nick Janos. Find these links and more in the show notes. If you have feedback or want to share an idea, email us at unfixed@meltsintoair.org. Thank you to Jamie Gunderson for producing and editing the show.